we're going to try to sum up all the good shit I've been saying the last week or so. Alright, so, where to begin? Where to begin? Let's start with understanding that Mullen Automotive is a company which has claimed many, many things. So back in March all the way through June of 2022, David Mitry was getting on podcasts, all different kinds, and there was not only David Mitry, but he hired someone for a test, and then that guy came on and answered questions, and there was many SEC filings. And ultimately, what all of this says is that Mullen has the best technology. Fox News has brought a hedge fund manager on to reaffirm this. Best battery technology. They have a Fortune 500 company deal for hundreds of thousands of cars or more, probably vans. Their battery tests, not only claimed by the guy who tests the battery, said that they could fit more battery into a smaller amount of space, so it can go further because there is more battery installed, even though it's still the same size as a normal car. And that additionally, on top of the battery being able to do that, it's also able to... So the thing about solar panels, the biggest thing about solar panels 10 years ago is that if you bought them, you knew 20 years from then, your power would produce half the amount that it did before. Because you have what's called degradation. I'm not sure. But basically what it means is every year 4% of your solar panel's ability to charge is lost. And whether you look at, like, I don't know if you were buying electric scooters back in the day, but all these batteries, the more you use them, eventually the less they were able to last their charge, and they die. Well, Mullen's battery is supposed to be able to go 5 times as many charges as Tesla without noticing a loss of efficiency, or the loss of efficiency is less than 1% a year over that 50-year time span. So all of that's pretty amazing, and all of that's been said, been in SEC filings, been verified by testers, all that good stuff. So that's why I like Mullen is the company, is because batteries are in everything, everywhere, all the time. And so Mullen's potential to go into other industries is, in my opinion, unlimited. Now, if you were going to say Mullen's the only company that is saying things and then not producing results or not sharing results, you'd be wrong. And so when I look around and I see it's every single company everywhere, then I can think 2 things. 1, everyone's corrupt. Or 2, most of them are corrupt and have nothing behind their claims, but some of them do. And so all the stock market has been forced into this crazy weird blackout period where nobody's willing to stand up to the SEC, nobody's willing to say the crazy things they were saying years ago, and everyone's just shut their fucking mouth. So if that's universally around the whole stock market, then you got to ask yourself what would drive such a thing. And then if you ask yourself, well, if the greatest company like stock to ever exist, especially for retail's behalf, is Tesla, and there's a company that does everything that Tesla does but better, then we can go and look at Tesla as a representative model of Mullen's potential. And when you do that, naturally, you're attacking Tesla's value, because Tesla's part of its value is it's the only real EV company at this point. I mean, there's other companies that you can see cars on the road, but for the most part, I mean, 9 out of 10 EVs you see on the road are Tesla. Well, that's definitely going to change. So the market cap that it used to own is going to be less. But then once we see that Mullen is sold out 12 months of manufacturing and they got to make what people are already buying, because their pre-orders are larger than Tesla's pre-orders, because their cars are better than Tesla's cars. Like, start to think about what kind of pattern that creates. And so it's good for the whole EV sector, but it's only going to be great for the company that can outperform Tesla. And as of right now, there's only one company with SEC filings claiming they might be able to outperform Tesla. And so we're going to rewind this just a second. And we're going to go to AMC. And we're going to take AMC as the example. And a lot of people, like especially the bears, get angry when you compare AMC to any other stock. But in reality, if you compared AMC to any other stock, you would find that there's only one stock that's similar to AMC, but this stock is better than AMC ever was. And it's going to blow your mind to understand why and how. So first you need to understand is that AMC was the main squeeze since 2020. COVID happened to you because of AMC, because a bunch of retail investors in March bought a shit ton of AMC at $1 a share, $1.80 a share, and they had to send it to $7, come back to $2. They saw nobody sold. They go to $5. They come back to $3, and they just realized they're fucked. And the only way that they can end this pain is to send AMC to a value so high that the dilution they have will the value so high that it will relieve the motivation for retail to buy the stock because they think it's undervalued. But then on top of that, as the value goes up, they have enough dilution to control any people that come in after they see it rise a substantial amount, because that's just what retail does. So instead of the market makers just paying the early people and saying, here's all your money, good job, you called it, you're right. They said, let's do COVID, let's make nobody allowed to go to the movies, let's try to bankrupt this stock for real, and see what happens. Well, what happens when that happens? Retail gets forced into their house, they're pissed, they see what's happening, and the people that already bought AMC, freaking Wall Street bets, already talking about AMC, saying, YOLO, everything you got, people, this is going to the moon, they're so undervalued, all this good stuff. And so slowly and slowly, it goes from 100 million shares diluted to 200 million shares diluted, and then boom, January 2021. The stock goes in a week from $4 to $20. GameStop goes from, I want to say it was $20 to $480. GameStop had no dilution. I mean, GameStop went from 30 million shares to 50 million shares from 2020 to 2021. AMC went from 30 million shares to 200 plus million shares to 2021. The dilution was at AMC. It was not at GameStop. And so they bring in DFV, they create this narrative of why the squeeze happened so everyone can come and look, and then they create this narrative of fake shares so everyone that does look, 90% of people are scared to mess with it because they saw a lot of people buy GameStop at the top and lose money and all this bull crap, right? Well, they do the GameStop thing, and then they keep trying to do the AMC bankruptcy thing, and all the way until June 2021, or it was like late May 2021, and here's what happens. We're at about 400 and I want to say 8 million shares outstanding. That means they have like 92 million shares left, and it runs from $12 and a $6 billion market cap all the way to $72 and a $50 billion market cap. Well, a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after, probably even just a week, they announced that they diluted 50 million of their 90 million remaining shares for another $1 billion. I think it was $900 million of capital raised. Well, no. It was more than that. So if you take the 50 million shares and you assume the average $30 a share, because we went, well, I mean, probably $20 a share is safer. So it ends up being about $1 billion in dilution, right? Well, check this out. That is the AMC thing. That is the AMC squeeze proof of dilution squeezes. It was seen on BBIG. It was seen on Prague. They weren't nearly as big as AMC, so their squeezes weren't quite as great, but they were still pretty great squeezes that you could have made a fortune off of. And we've learned this thing as retail, and a lot of us have learned it, but not everybody, that there's this thing called a dilution war, okay? And so in this dilution war, what we find out is that the market makers will force the CEO representatives to dilute so that the news channels, the data companies can fuck with the data. Everybody can create this FUD narrative around why this stock is not a good stock to buy, and yet it ends up being the most profitable stock you could buy months later almost every time until Mullen. Mullen's the first stock they were ever right about. And I mean, here's the thing. People can blame me and say that I lost them money in July 2022. You could really only try to claim that if you bought options, because if you know what really happened is that Mullen went from 52 cents to $2 and it dropped to 90 cents in 2 days. And this is February 29th. In 2 days, it goes to $2 from 52 cents, up 300% in a day. No, it was 200% in 1 day, I think, and 216% or something. And after that, it drops 50, 60, 70%. Well, guess what? That's when I started pumping. So it's at like 96 cents when I start my first video, start going on Reddit, all this other stuff. And I'm pumping hard, the hardest you ever heard pump, because like I saw the billion shares that traded. I saw the 200%. I saw the CEO. I read into Mullen and I said, this is the new squeeze. This is the new AMC. This was the day I knew it was the new AMC. So what do I do then? So I start pumping. I start going on Twitter explaining dilution is coming, and like on a Friday I say expect a dilution announcement next Monday. All the bears are saying don't buy Mullen, saying nobody's buying Mullen, and like they're like, how do you know about dilution? How do you know if dilution's coming? Nobody's announced dilution. And I say, because I've been through this shit before, motherfucker. And I say, I know dilution's coming because they've delayed it for 2 weeks and it never gets delayed that long. Well, with Mullen, it definitely has got delayed longer, but they did give the dilution within 2 weeks that time. The first dilution announcement was March 14th, and it was like 150 million shares or some crap. And so Mullen drops down to 72 cents from the 96 cents in the first week of March. And at 72 cents, I'm yelling, bet the motherfucking farm. And it runs in the next 2 weeks all the way to $4.18. We had at least a 600% gain. Maybe 500% gain in the matter of 2 weeks from the time I started pumping Mullen. Then we went up and down, up and down, up and down, hanging around $1 towards the end. End of May, they announced a dilution announcement for 1.2, or dilution vote for 1.25 billion shares. The vote finally is announced end of July when they say they diluted all 500 million shares. And they will say that back in May 30th, they had 51% shares remaining, and so that they had enough to win the vote. And so they got the extra 1.25 billion shares. Well, after this, they ended up voting themselves all the way to 5 billion shares of common stock. And so they screwed us extra hard. I never imagined they'd do it twice. I could understand once, but twice was fucking nuts. And so they do. Well, I want to back up a second. So after they announced the first dilution vote, I said, do not sell your shares until they announced that they've diluted some of the shares of the 1.25 billion. Because I thought legally they would have to give us the squeeze, and then they could use that 1.25 billion to dilute at the top, so that they could raise a couple $1 billion and still have 600 million shares left to dilute. That's what I expected. Second, I saw the first SEC filing that said the dilution had passed. I started telling everyone in my Discord of over 200 people to start buying puts. There's no chance we can squeeze if they got 1.25 billion shares to dilute, and they're willing to dilute them before a squeeze. And so the stock price was only at 80 cents at this time. It was still above the price the lowest price I was pumping at since the squeeze began, from the time that I started saying buy calls to the time I started saying buy puts. So a lot of people want to blame me that they lost their money, but like a lot of people probably just aren't man enough to man up for their own mistakes. And if you bought options and you followed me into the grave, like, I promise you one day we're going to be respected as heroes for it. So here's the thing. They give themselves the shares, they dilute the shares, they give themselves more shares to 5 billion shares, and they wait all the way until it's at 3.7 billion shares outstanding and 6 cents a share to do a 25 to 1 reverse split, which pushed the stock back to $1.50 and reduced our 3.7 billion majority ownership of Mullen to 150 million shares, while they still have 1.3 billion shares left. So we own 150 million, they own 1.3 billion. Okay, now check this out. We go from this reverse split happens on May 23rd. Okay? So on May 23rd, we go from 150 million shares to June 22nd of 650 million shares. And they announced a new vote for a new reverse split after the May 23rd reverse split, and afterward back down to something like 12 cents. And they announced a new reverse split of up to 100 to 1. They only ended up doing 9 to 1, which is fucking huge and shows that David actually cares. It really does. Like 100 to 1, I might have been out. No joke. Like at least for 6 months, until you guys bought enough dips that I thought it was ready again. But a 9 to 1, that, like, if once we finish the math, you're going to see what a 9 to 1 does for us. So we get to a 650 million shares outstanding by June 22nd. And then and then we get an announcement today showing that at June 30th, that instead of the 650 million shares changing to 71 million shares at $1 a share like we expected, like the data showing us, it shows that June 30th, the outstanding shares was 86 million shares. That means just from June 22nd to June 30th, we can prove that the data was at least 86 million shares outstanding, counting the reverse split. But every data company on the earth that did decide to update only said 71 million, even though we know from the SEC filing as of June 30th, it was at least 86 million times 9, which ends up being almost 800 million shares. So if there's 800 million shares, 650 million shares at June 22nd, 2023, 800 million shares at June 30th, 2023, then we know in 8 days we just bought 150 million shares. If you go look at the stock price, there's no way the average stock price we were buying at is anything less than $14 or 14 cents a share. That's 20 million bucks in a week retail put into fucking Mullen. That's a big fucking deal. But let's finish the math. So we get 800 million shares, and that at June 30th, and we start counting the volume from July 1st all the way until the reverse split of August 14th. So literally 30 trading days, and inside that 30 trading days we have at least 10 billion shares traded. And when we look at the volume in the June 22nd to June 30th, we see 2 billion shares traded. Well, if we bought 150 million shares and 2 billion shares traded, that means we're 7.5% of the fucking volume. Well, if we traded 10 billion shares and we're 7.5% of the volume, and we haven't got an update on that fucking volume yet, that would be 750 million shares. So if you take the 800 million shares plus the 750 million shares, we get 1.55 billion shares. Now we subtract the 150 million shares from the 3.7 billion dilution, because that's part of the 5 billion. So we get 1.55 billion minus the 150 million, we get 1.4 billion. We take 1.4 billion and we divide that by, well, we take 1.4 billion plus the 3.7 billion, and that puts us at 5.1 billion. That means they have traded 100 million shares more than they have outstanding, assuming we were at 7.5%. But because we ran to 32 cents, and then like there probably was some selling, But since we've dropped back and we've been doing this crazy stock price action that no one's ever seen before, where every day it dropped lower than the day before for 14 consecutive days, like this kind of shit shows that the buying power is probably higher than ever. And so if you count the selling from the 32-cent run plus the increased buying power of this crazy stock price action we're seeing, we're still probably averaging 5, 6, 7%. So no matter what way you do the math, not only does it show that when we have the 1.4 billion and we divide that by the 9, that number is going to be larger than what they got remaining when we assume the 1 point. Like, here's the thing, we can't even have 1.4 billion, even though, like, if we assume that we can't have fake shares, then there can't even be 1.4 billion. So that means we got, let's just say 1.3 billion, and that makes it like exactly 5 billion. But if you divide that by 9, I don't know exactly what you get, but the point is that if they got 100 million shares left and we got 1.3 billion divided by 9, we have more shares than them. We're majority owner. If they announce the record date today, even after reverse split, they cannot give themselves more shares. Here's the best part. I'm going to sum this up with the best part because I believe I did that math justice. Somebody says I need to slow down on the math. So understand, I'm going to repeat it one more time. We know that there was 3.7 billion shares and it got reduced to 150 million shares from the 150 million shares from the 25-to-1 reverse split. Okay, so now we know that they have 1.3 billion shares left. We saw the record date of 650 million, but that's counting the 150 million from the record date or from the reverse split. So we should subtract that because we're only looking at the 1.3 billion, so that's got nothing to do with the 150 million from the reverse split or the 3.7 billion that turned into that 150 million. So that is out of our head for now. So we know we bought 500 million shares in the first from the first record date of June 22nd. Then this record date we got today of June 30th shows that 500 million increased to 750 million. We bought roughly 200 million. No. It was 150 million shares. So that 500 million grew into 650 million. We know that from June 30th or July 1st to the reverse split, we traded 10 billion shares. If we just assume 6% of that was buying, then that would be 600 million shares. So we got the 500 plus the 150 is 650 plus the 600 million is 1.25 billion. Okay? So 1.25 billion divided by the 9 plus the 150 million divided by the 9 is what our total outstanding shares of what retail ownership should be right now today. If you take that number, that exact number, it would suggest that they have 50 million shares left to dilute at $1 a share. If they have 50 million shares left to dilute at $1 a share, and we have 100 and something million shares, they cannot do an announcement to ask for more shares without us being able to vote no for it. Like last time they approved the reverse split, but we had a ton of no votes. If they try anything like that again, we win the vote this time. They cannot hit us with the reverse split. They cannot hit us with more dilution. It's over. The math says it's over. They do not have the shares. It's over. And so the best part is this. Let's assume they have 100 million shares, even though I just said 50 million. Let's assume they have 100 million shares. If it runs 1,000% right now to $10, that 100 million shares is worth $1 billion. Rewind this video and go find out how much did I say AMC diluted to the FOMO that came in after AMC started running from $12 to $72. AMC raised $1 billion. So if we run 1,000% right now, the $1 billion that is going to come in is not enough dilution power to stop it from keep going up. So what I'm telling you is the 1,000%, the first 1,000% gain is no squeeze. It is mandatory. After that is when the retail squeeze begins, and it's about who makes the most money and who's selling for profits and all that crazy stuff. Somebody just said we can literally make proposals for a vote in the future due to we own the majority. You don't need to own the majority. Any individual owner of Mullen can go hire some type of stock lawyer and write up a proposal and pay their lawyer to submit it to Mullen, and it will be on the next proposal as long as you submitted it 90 days before the next meeting. It might be 60 days or something. But here's the thing. If we're going to do a proposal, the best proposal I can think of right now is that Mullen commits to, after the squeeze, to never raise more dilution money, because they're already going to have billions of dollars. They're not going to need cash. And they're going to commit, is what I want them to do, is commit to never raise more money unless first they announce what the money's for, what the new business plan is, and how it's going to help us long term. Mathematically, I want to see the details before any dilution is ever approved again, or before any dilution is ever sold from Mullen. Like, I want to know that they cannot dilute unless they convince us of the dilution first. And they tell us exactly what they're going to do with the money. And why the money they have in the bank right now isn't enough. That is how businesses are supposed to be ran, to make sure they reach optimal growth. Oh, man. Who's excited? Anybody excited? Tell me if you're excited. Ron Kuby is pretty stoked. That's what I like to hear. Man, my last live stream got so many views. I thought this one might get more, and I feel like this one went like way better. Like this one I just fucking nailed. I don't know if I could have said it any better. Oh man. Well, that's it, guys. The big finale was that when we go up 1,000%, the dilution power they have is less than the amount of FOMO AMC received after it went up less than 500%. That's the big reveal. That's the mathematical fucking gotcha. Oh man, we got him. We got him. Everyone should start singing. We got him.